the players' meeting, the Lakers and the Clippers players were the only ones to vote to boycott the rest of the season. You also reported that LeBron left that meeting abruptly. What are you hearing about how this all played out the rest of the night?
Yeah, so in the lead up to the vote, there were a lot of different ideas thrown around, and that's what you see during these player calls, during these player meetings. Kyrie Irving led a movement in June, and on that call, I was told there were a lot of different ideas that were thrown around, and guys just were not unified on one accord. And you saw a similar aspect come up last night when the players held a meeting together, involved the coaches at first. And when the coaches were there, Doc Rivers, I'm told, was really speaking about voting, about how these players can really use their power, use their rights to affect change while continuing to play and do their jobs. But once the coaches left, it was really a free-for-all for the players to really discuss and determine which route they'll take. And then there was a vote near the end. And I'm told out of all the teams, the Lakers and the Clippers were the only two that voted not to play for the remainder of the season, in the aftermath of the Jacob Blake shooting. And once that occurred, Udonis Haslem, I'm told, was one of the veteran players that spoke up. And part of his message was, if the Lakers and Clippers aren't playing, what else are we all doing here? And so LeBron James, I'm told, was the first guy to leave that meeting, and the Lakers and Clippers players were not that far behind.
Shams, you also broke the story that LeBron was pointedly calling for owners to be more involved in this movement. What are you hearing on that and the potential reaction from the true power brokers in the league in response to the most powerful player in the league?
Yeah, LeBron, I'm told, his message in the meeting early and in the middle was, we need to hold the owners more accountable. They are the ones who are in positions of power, have the financial resources. And so his message was clear. But again, how they hold the owners accountable, that's what's in question. The owners and the NBPA agreed on a $300 million social justice fund that will go toward empowerment of young black people. And that is something that was announced recently. So that is an initiative that was not there before. So what the NBA players are doing already started to provide change. Now, how much further can they go? Was LeBron referencing, possibly politically moving? That is up in the air. It still remains to be seen what LeBron's exact motive, and message behind that. But he wasn't the only player, I'm told, that spoke up about wanting the owners to have more accountability.
Sean, LeBron James, if we question LeBron James before and his motives, I don't know if it even matters anymore to even have this discussion, right? Like, this guy was the first one to walk out of this meeting. This is a guy who you put up there with Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, chasing success, chasing rings, Tom Brady. He's in that same category. For this guy to say, I'm not playing ball, how big of a decision and impact is that around the entire NBA?
It's a big impact in the terms of, he's obviously the face of the league, and Pat Beverly made a comment during the pandemic, a couple months ago, that if LeBron James says, whatever he says we're doing, we're all doing. And so now you have a situation where there's a meeting, and out of all the teams, every other team voted to play besides LeBron James and his Lakers and the Clippers. And so, I think throughout the league and around, LeBron, the sense over the last few months has been he wants to play. He wants to get back on the floor as long as the environment is safe. All these star players, they wanted to play. Kawhi, Giannis, as long as the environment to play was safe, these guys wanted to get back on the floor. So last night was a true, I think, a stand. And for those two teams, obviously the two teams that are going to be competing in the Western Conference Finals, Brandon, for them to speak out and say, we're in favor of just leaving, going home, it leaves the season in some peril now.
Shams, yesterday we saw Chris Paul talk to Russell Westbrook in a hall, and it felt like they were exchanging some news. Can you give me a sense of today's schedule and how the meetings are working for today and what we can expect in today's news cycle?
Yeah, there's a Board of Governors call at 11 a.m., and that will be, very interesting to monitor in terms of what comes out of it. Will there be a resolution? I had one owner text me last night. It's up to the players. We want to come up with something that might, impact and help alleviate any concerns they might have. But at the end of the day, it is up to the players. And so the players at the same time will have a meeting in Orlando on campus. So you're going to have these two meetings at the same time.
Sean, do you not find it interesting that it's always up to the players? Like, why isn't the owners making the decision? Think about that. It keeps going back to the court. It keeps going back to the locker room. Owners need to make the decision, it seems like.
And that may be what LeBron James is referencing. When these two teams went to China, and that incident happened with the Daryl Morey tweet. Adam Silver, LeBron James, both the Lakers and Nets players got in a room, got in a meeting, and the messaging of, hey, guys, players, you guys get out there in the media, talk to the reporters and explain what's going on. That was the messaging that was going on at the time. And LeBron James pushed back on it back then. This was back in, I want to say, October. I'm losing track of time. This is going back in October. And these guys, LeBron James was adamant that we should not be the ones that go face the media. It should be, the league office. It should be Adam Silver. It should be the owners. And so in some ways, you're right. Players have been put in the forefront time and time again. And I think there is some action they want to see from the owners. And again, Brandon, the Lakers and Clippers were in the minority in that they were the only two teams that decided, to vote not to play. So the remainder teams wanted to play. And so that's what makes it so interesting is when you have two teams that are so, in terms of the NBA's power scheme right now, the Lakers and Clippers are the two best teams in the Western Conference.
Shams, let me ask you this. You've been in the bubble since day one. You've talked to the players. You're a part of the ins and outs. A lot of what happened yesterday, the boycott, is clearly in reaction to the Jacob Blake shooting. But I wonder how much of a sense you've gotten of the frustration, of the restlessness from these players that they wanted to do more, that maybe they felt like their voices weren't heard, and perhaps boycotting the remainder of the season is just an extension of that. How much have you heard? How much frustration has been boiling over from the players?
I think it all can play hand in hand. I think that, guys got in the meeting last night and spoke and talked about how, everything we came in this bubble for, trying to spark change, it just has not happened. And I think it's a sense of maybe some hopelessness, trying to control the uncontrollable. These things, there was a coach that relayed in the meeting last night, like, these changes that the players want to make takes years upon years upon years. It does not happen overnight. It took Maya Moore multiple years in her quest after she left the WNBA, and she deserves to be applauded. But if these players are wanting to make changes, actions like last night when the Bucks called the Attorney General of Wisconsin, those are the types of actions that can potentially spark change. But not playing, I don't know how much that can do. Where will these players go after? Are they just going to go off on their own? Are they really going to be out there? Like Jaylen Brown said, are you really going to be out? Last night, he said, are you guys really going to be out there in the trenches? So these are all questions that are up in the air. And this is really the first time these players truly gathered in person while they were in the bubble. I had a player ask me last night, why didn't we do this on night one of the bubble? There are a lot of different questions still out there.
Shams, two quick things, or I guess two things before you go. One is, do you think it's more likely that this season resumes or more likely that it doesn't? And then the other question would be this. I'm not at all accusing the Lakers or the Clippers of bluffing. I don't think they are in the least. But because they're in a bubble, if they can leave, like if LeBron or Kawhi just left, they're not allowed to play for a number of days. Like that. The fact that they're still there does it strike you as a possibility the vote, I don't want to say was symbolic, but it was a leverage play as far as if you as the ownership don't do more than symbolic and financial gestures, if you don't press the levers of power, we are willing to leave, even if right now, even though they voted to stop the season, maybe they don't actually want to stop the season. Does that make sense? Are you getting the sense of that at all? And do you think the season resumes?
That was a theory I definitely heard coming out of the meeting was, this was a stand. This was a message sent to the owners going into this owners call today. This was a stand sent to the league office prior to their meeting today. And, the Lakers and Clippers were in the minority on this, right? Because every other team wanted to continue, voted to continue to play. These are the two powerhouse teams that chose not to. And even though that they are in the minority in terms of the voting last night, it sends a message because they are the top two teams in the Western Conference, probably the top two teams potentially in the league, along with the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference. So there's no question a message was sent, and that was, most likely the real outcome they wanted from this. I couldn't really tell you if I think the season will go on or not. I guess we'll see today. But my hope, and I think the hope of a lot of players, is still that they'll be able to figure something out. And I had some players come off the call and say, listen, like the board of governors, they'll figure something out. They'll come to us with something, and we'll get this back and going in a few days. I think that is what the hope is around different players, especially the guys that want to play. And again, most players are not financially stable enough to just go a year without playing or deal with a lockout, potentially not play. These guys need to be involved in playing and being in the type of return environment.
Shams, have you gotten a sense from any reaction from the players that the Bucks or all of the players in the bubble